Welcome in a special episode of the camp, slightly shorter than normal, but huge news for the Badgers as four-star quarterback Carter Smith out of Florida has committed to Wisconsin. He obviously was originally the quarterback commit at Michigan, decommitted when they started going after the number one kid in the country, which they ended up getting. And it left Carter Smith an opportunity to reopen his recruitment. And there were some other teams involved. Florida State was a big name. Then they flipped a different quarterback on, was it Thursday night, Friday night? And all of a sudden, Wisconsin had a great opportunity to add to their quarterback room, and they did so in Carter Smith, who becomes the second highest rated high school commit in the recruiting rankings era, according to the 24/7 composite. Only Graham Mertz was higher than him, Jesse.
This is such a huge coup for the Badgers, and I would say perhaps the most significant high school recruit that they've landed under Luke Fickell in 2 years, because we've seen what this team has been about here the last 2 seasons, and especially this year. You need a quarterback if you want to move the program forward, and Carter Smith gives them that opportunity to have a top 15 quarterback. I won't say fall in your lap, because Wisconsin had to make this happen, but come off the board as late as he did is really just tremendous for the Badgers, and what a good upside he presents here, and obviously optimism for the future.
So you had a chance to chat with his high school coach and his father too, right?
I did.
So yeah, so you've had an opportunity to get a little bit to know him a little bit without actually talking to him, but like getting to know him and what he's all about. What is Wisconsin getting in Carter Smith?
Well, his high school coach describes him as essentially he's a quarterback with the mentality of a linebacker. And I watched his second round playoff game and really got a little bit of a sense of that, though he has been battling a shoulder injury. But the linebacker mentality comes from he wants to seek out contact. He wants to deliver a punishing blow. And he's been a 4-year starter on the varsity program at Bishop Barrow High School in Fort Myers, Florida. And his coach said that it was like the second or third game of his freshman year. He's 14 years old, and he scrambles out of the pocket, and he could have gone out of bounds, but he saw there was a safety there, a 3-star guy who ended up signing initially with Arizona State. And he tried to level him so he could set the tone. And his dad told me he's the type of kid who tells the offensive coordinator, don't call a pass on the first play. I want to run to get my blood flowing a little bit. Now, I will say, I asked his high school coach, hey, that's great in high school. How's that going to work in the Big Ten? And he said, well, he's probably going to have to stop hunting for players or have that sort of linebacker approach. But that is a huge part of his game. He is a dual threat quarterback. He has tremendous mobility. He's given teams a lot of problems. And you look at his statistics, and I wrote them down because I didn't want to get him wrong. He's thrown for over 8,700 yards. He's got 87 touchdown passes, 17 interceptions, but he's also run for over 2,600 yards with 56 touchdowns. And I think the best example of the mentality that he has came just a couple weeks ago in his first round playoff game. So he'd been battling a shoulder injury. He missed 2 games, and he came back for this huge game, and he aggravated the shoulder injury in the first half, so he left the game. And at the time, the team was down 21-0. Now, they had a freshman quarterback bring them back to 21-14, but they're down at halftime, and he told his coach, there's no way I'm going out like this. Put me in, and if I can't throw, essentially we're going to win the game anyway. That's what they did. He threw 4 times the entire game, not in the second half. He ran for 118 yards and led him to a win. So that's kind of Carter Smith in a snapshot.
So he is – did you get an official – size on him? Because I mean the numbers obviously suggest he's, or I should say the numbers, but the recruiting sites suggest he's like 6'3", right? 6'3", 6'4", 185 pounds, 190 pounds. That's probably, when you talk about seeking guys out, it's probably been less likely if in college if you're going to be that size. But it feels like he's got some room to grow.
Yeah, 6'3". I mean, look, 185, 195. It's not going to be whatever it says when he comes in. And the expectation is to enroll early, and we'll see how that all plays out. But It is the mobility aspect. And one of the things Luke Fickell has been talking to them about is the comparisons with Desmond Ridder, the quarterback he had at Cincinnati, who was able to develop over time, helped lead the Bearcats to the college football playoff during the 2021 season. So he's got mobility. It's being smart with that, but we know that whatever this offensive system is moving forward, needs a mobile quarterback, is going to utilize more of a power spread approach. And Carter Smith seems like the type of kid who can take advantage of that. And I would also say it's not like he's a runner who's just chucking the ball in the pocket, which is something that his coach, and also I had a chance to talk to his private quarterbacks coach. They both said that he has an arm and he can make all the throws on the field. Now, a lot of those throws come from rolling out of the pocket, but he's been tremendously successful at the high school level. And he's just not afraid to deliver some punishing blows if they should happen to present themselves.
Yeah, if you go and watch the video or his highlights, and for those on YouTube, you're watching them right now, the first throw is like standing in his own end zone and throwing to the 50. I don't know if he put all of his weight into that one or put all of his arm strength into it, but that I think kind of like suggests what he's got, correct, in your mind?
Yeah. I mean, he's got the arm strength. And again, he does have a private quarterbacks coach. They've spent a lot of time working on some different facets of his game, but shortening his motion and just making him a more fluid quarterback. But I think that these are some of the traits that can translate well to Wisconsin.
I think you're right. The shortening the motion, I think, is something that stood out to me as I was watching the highlights. And because I think when you look at Mabry, in the little time that we've gotten to see him, he's got a little bit of a longer delivery. And, in high school, I think that works. I don't know that it's necessarily going to work against the best competition, right? Like if you've got an elongated delivery, it's going to be very tough in college unless you've got just an absolute gun that can throw into every little spot. It's going to be tough to be it's going to be tough. You have to throw with anticipation even more so than you would if you had a shorter motion and a bigger arm. But when you watch the video of this kid, it looks like that motion is more compact than maybe what we've seen so far with Mabry.
It's hard to compare what you're watching at the high school level to what we've seen in practices in college. And I do wonder how ready he'll be when he gets here. But I will say that the people around him certainly believe that the way that he handles himself, the mentality, the composure that he has, and the fact that he's been doing this since he was a freshman gives him at least a leg up when he comes here. And again, we will see what the quarterback room looks like when Carter Smith is on campus. But another thing that I think is worth noting here, and it's one of the things his private quarterbacks coach told me, is because of the way this went down at Michigan, I think he's coming here with a huge chip on his shoulder. And while that may sound like a cliche, this is a huge part of Carter Smith's story, and I don't think you could tell the story of his commitment to Wisconsin without the story of the decommitment from Michigan, because he was committed to Michigan for nearly a year, committed in November of 2023. And when I was talking to his dad, he said that Carter went up with his uncle for the Michigan State game. So this would have been, I believe, October 16th. And at the time had no inclination that he wasn't going to be he thought he was the only quarterback in the class. And during that meeting, found out from the staff that they were in fact pursuing Bryce Underwood, who again is from Michigan, is the number one player in the country. And of course, if you can get him, you get him. But I know that the Smith family felt like Michigan wasn't fully honest with him, and however it ended up going down. But I also know that Michigan changed its approach, stepping up significantly with its NIL package. Jim Harbaugh was not that kind of a coach. And his dad even said, Carter Smith's dad said, if Harbaugh was still the coach, without question, Carter Smith would be his guy. He said he would have told the boosters and the alums to go kick rocks because that wasn't Harbaugh's style. But this is a new era with Sharon Moore. And the Athletics reported that Bryce Underwood is going to make more than $10 million potentially with a multi-year NIL package. So again, that is all part of the story, but it led to this sort of revolving door of some of the top quarterbacks then switching schools, because Underwood decommitted from LSU, committed to Michigan. And then Carter Smith, of course, ends up at Wisconsin after visiting for the most electric atmosphere that I think you and I have seen in quite some time, the Oregon game. I know it didn't go Wisconsin's way, but that was pretty significant too, being able to actually see that in person. And I mean, this is the other part of the story. The next morning, they met with both Phil Longo and Luke Fickell just hours before Luke Fickell fired Phil Longo. it's really a wild story. And obviously that had no bearing on the outcome of the commitment, but crazy times.
Well, I mean, that's what I was going to ask. My next question was going to be, how did this all play out with Wisconsin not having an offensive coordinator? But then when we were texting about this, you're like, well, actually, Phil was in the meeting. Um, it, it's a little weird, probably a little awkward, I assume, for all involved. Did anybody have any sense at the time that I mean, he wasn't going to be there?
So his dad did say it was awkward, but maybe that's just in retrospect, because at the time, again, no one had said anything. I think they got the sense that maybe things weren't going to be moving in that direction, but it wasn't until after that meeting that they found out that Luke Fickell was moving on from Phil Longo. But the thing that Luke preached to them in the time after that happened, and again, that was not all that long ago, was I need you to trust me in this process. And I also want your involvement in having conversations about how we move forward, because it's the most important piece to the puzzle. If you're a quarterback, who's going to be my offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach? And so a lot of that had to do with just them feeling comfortable trusting Luke Fickell. And I do think that it's going to be more of a power spread approach that can utilize Carter Smith's skill set. So that is a huge part of the story. But I also think when you're Carter Smith and you're in a spot where you've decommitted and it's October 20th and you plan to sign on December 4th, you better have a lot of bullet points for why you're going to pick a school. And if there's a school that doesn't have an offensive coordinator, his other option or top option was Florida State, and they've kind of been a disaster this season too. So I think he feels like the future is brighter here in Madison.
I mean, when you talk about disaster, one team has one win, I believe.
Yeah, an absolute disaster, right? Yeah, okay. I'm not trying to compare.
Now they did. Now again, they were on the doorstep of the college football playoff last year, 4-team playoff. Had the quarterback not gotten hurt, they would have been in it. And maybe this year doesn't play out this way, but that's a tough spot. And I think the really interesting thing is how this plays out with what type of offense Wisconsin is going to run. We know that Luke said we're not going back. As you just mentioned, the power spread. There are variations to that, and what exactly that looks like. And certainly Florida State has an opening for their offensive coordinator spot. Oklahoma has an opening for their offensive coordinator spot. And it feels like, Wisconsin and Florida State fought for Carter Smith. It's possible that they're also going to be fighting for a certain offensive coordinator as well in this in these next few weeks. But when you look at Carter Smith just by himself, I shouldn't say it. When you look at Carter Smith, he's not by himself at this moment exactly right now, right? In this class. There's another quarterback committed to Wisconsin. His name's Landon Locke.
Yeah.
And obviously the Phil Longo thing certainly, I think, plays a factor here. And Braden's future here certainly plays a factor here. But I assume Landon thought he would be the only quarterback in the class. He's not. He's coming off a torn ACL. This, again, I'm not making any predictions. But if I had to guess, I feel like Carter Smith will end up being the only quarterback in the 2025 recruiting class.
Yeah, speculation at this point, but obviously Landon Locke finds himself in a similar situation at what Carter found himself in, other than Michigan went and got the number one quarterback in the country. But I think the other difference here is both Locks came to play in Phil Longo's offense. And we know that the family and Longo have a long-standing relationship. And now Longo's gone and Wisconsin has to move in a different direction. So I don't know what that means for the quarterback situation, whether Landon will sign. Obviously, there's the transfer portal for guys who are currently on the roster that opens December 9th. But I do think the quarterback room is going to look different. It's very rare that I can recall that Wisconsin has brought in 2 quarterbacks on scholarship in a given class. But there are also, you want to have the right numbers too. And at this point, we do know that Cole LaCrue is moving on, going to the transfer portal. So there's one scholarship. And we'll have to see what happens. But I think it's very clear that the fact they've pursued Carter Smith says that they felt they needed somebody else to help try to move this program forward and get them over the top.
So Carter Smith is I believe the 6th 4-star quarterback, in terms of the 24/7 composite to pick Wisconsin. Obviously, Mabry was a 4-star. He is the lowest rated 4-star of the 6. If you go in order, it's Graham, it's Carter Smith, Bart Houston, back in, I believe that was 2012. DJ Gillens, we forget about DJ Gillens. I believe he was class of 2014. And then you have Mabry as the 6th guy there. So this, I mean, what is happening right here with Carter Smith doesn't happen very often in Wisconsin. 6 4-star quarterbacks in a matter of 20 plus years. So this is a huge thing. Now, I say that, and then I go and look at the 3 lowest rated guys that are in this top 20 that I put together. And 3-star Scott Tolzien, 3-star John Stocco, 2-star Joel Stave. A lot of wins among those 3 guys, a lot of wins. And you think of the most successful quarterback in the last 20 years, obviously taking out the transfer that is Russell Wilson, you probably would say, obviously Scott Tolzien is probably the most accomplished of those 2, or of the others. But then, Jack Cohn obviously was a 3-star, a high 3-star, but still a 3-star. This is not normal, I would say, for Wisconsin.
It's not. And of course, the recruiting rankings, it's always served as a lesson to take it with a grain of salt. Now it is based on evaluations out of high school and what you have seen to that point and how you project. Projections are just not always accurate, as we've certainly seen. Now, what it does is create a level of expectation on a kid, and sometimes they meet it and sometimes they don't. But I always wonder, well, what's the difference between a composite rating of 0.93 and 0.87 in the long run? It's not much. But you're right. They don't get 4-star top 15 quarterbacks very often. And the hope all along for Wisconsin has been, you've got all these tools. And what if Wisconsin had a quarterback that could lift them to new heights? And I'm not going to say that Carter is that guy. That would not only would it not be fair, but like, I have no idea. I mean, remember what we said 6 years ago about Graham Mertz? It was very exciting because that just never happened. And he torched Kansas high school football, and he was great in the All-American Bowl and had an amazing first game as the starter. And obviously there's a lot of other factors that lead to the success of a quarterback, but it didn't match those expectations. But what I will say is, when you're looking at what the future could be, you need somebody. You need somebody on which you can pin your hopes. And it feels like Carter is that guy. And this speaks to me in part to the larger perspective here. And we touched on this when Wisconsin got a 4-star prospect pretty recently that it flipped from Michigan on defense. This is now 8 4-star prospects in the 2025 class, in the 24/7 composite at least. And that means they've gotten 19 4-star players in these 2 classes. And I said before, but this is where it's going to come from if Wisconsin is going to make that leap under Luke Fickell.
What is their blue chip ratio then now? No, I'm messing with you. It's that's a favorite stat that some people like to pull out, just because, you go and look at the teams that have won the national championship, really the teams that have been in the college football playoff, and more often than not, they have a certain number of 4- and 5-star players, the blue chip ratio that they have. I believe I don't know. I believe that was is that an Ari Wasserman thing?
Honestly, I don't know.
Okay. I thought it was. And I was going to say your coworker athletic, but he's not the athletic anymore. So, yeah, it's irrelevant, but the more good players you have, the better chance you have of hitting is you know what I mean? Like, not every 4-star and 5-star is going to work out. That's just facts, right? But the more talented players you have, the better chance you have of hitting on some of them being very, very good. And, Wisconsin's hit rate at quarterback with the top guys has not been good. I mean, you could go down that list, and we'll take Mabry out of it. The other 4-star guys that they've had here, are any of them hits?
Well,
is that not fair for Graham?
Yes, because I would say Graham was a hit. He was a 3-year starter. He went 19-13. Like, he's not a hit relative to what we thought was possible and what he thought was possible. The dude was talking about bringing a natty here. But that's a heck of a lot different from a DJ Gillens coming in who never plays it down. He was a 3-year starter. And Bart Houston, started some games, but like Graham, to me, I think I would consider a hit, even though I know most people listening probably don't. 32 starts. That's a lot.
I mean, Bart Houston had the unfortunate situation where he had to sit behind the all-time wins leader. So that's obviously the toughest part for Bart to have to try and get over, right? Like that's not something easy. It's not something easy to do. But yeah, look, some of Wisconsin's best quarterbacks, I mean, there's definitely an argument. Their best quarterbacks have been the lowest rated ones, but you want to continue to have good players in your program. And Carter Smith's a good player, and we'll see exactly what it looks like for him come January, and then I guess for us, April, and exactly what he brings to the college game. Here's the thing. You have been, and I've been like this too, especially when I was writing more, the idea of a true freshman quarterback coming in and playing at Wisconsin, it just doesn't happen. You go back, it's 1990, I believe, or 91.
91, Jay Macias. Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah. So it's been a long time. Now these are different times. These are different offenses than that you're asking them to play in. But the thing is, I don't know what that quarterback room is going to look like. We have no idea. It's going to look completely different than it does right now, I think, with perhaps the only scholarship holdover being Mabry. So, and we'll see what happens with Tyler Van Dyke and all that stuff. But this is going to look a whole lot different. So I'm not saying that it's not going to happen with Carter Smith right away, but it feels like whoever ends up being the offensive coordinator is going to potentially have his guy that he wants to bring with him, or have a guy that wants to play for him, an experienced guy that's going to come in and be that guy. We'll see. But Carter Smith, big time ad by Wisconsin here, and it's a huge recruiting win for sure.
No question. It's one of those things that helps make you feel a lot better if you're part of this program or a fan about what the future could hold, because this has been a missing link for a little while here.
Yep, for sure. All right, well, we'll see. Signing day coming up here in just a little bit. You mentioned Graham Mertz talking about a natty. I remember doing our signing day show. I think we did it. We were in the studio because it was pre-COVID, obviously, but doing it in the studio and like asking John McNamara from Badger Blitz whether does Graham Mertz win a national championship Wisconsin or not? He said not. He said not. So it's
good for him. I will tell you, I remember talking to his high school coach. I went down to Kansas and did a big story on Graham, and his high school coach said, I don't know how you can say that in the next 4 years, Wisconsin won't be in the college football playoff, but that was the level of expectation. But I would say, much like year one of the Luke Fickell era, I think the Graham Mertz experience has taught us all to perhaps pump the brakes a little bit. And while it is exciting to see a top 15 four-star quarterback, let's wait and let the kid develop and find out what he's got. But starting with a top 15 guy makes you feel pretty good.
Yep, for sure. All right, Jesse, thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.